it's Maddie, and today I'm going to be showing you the basics of working with AC100, and we're going to be making a cute little cloud tray, so stay tuned. So before I get started, I'm going to tell you all the tools I have laid out and prepared. First, I have my apron. As you can see, it's a little bit messy, which is fine. That's the fun of it. Next, I have a two-part bucket system back here. One's filled with just regular water, the other one's filled with soapy water. It's just a great way to keep your tools clean and mess-free. Next, I have my gloves, and you only necessarily need one pair of gloves, but I like to have a couple just to eliminate mess. Once again, it can get messy, so having a couple pairs of gloves is just very beneficial. The next tool I have is my mixing blade, the high shear mixing blade. This is a great way to eliminate the lumps and bumps in your mixtures. You don't necessarily need this. You can just use a normal mixing tool, but we really recommend using one of these. It really helps out the process. Right here, I have my silicone cups. I'm gonna be using one for the powder and then one for the liquid and mixing everything in it. I can explain those more while I'm using it. Then I have my kitchen scale. It doesn't matter what type of scale it is. The only thing is that it measures in grams. Jesmonite is all in grams or kilograms, so having a scale that speaks the same language really helps. Next, I have my pigment. Today we're gonna be making a blue cloud. So just a little Jesmonite liquid pigment right there. And then I have my cloud mold, essentially. It's super cute. This is available on our website. Then I have my silicone spatulas, which I love these as well. It's a great way to also eliminate mess, since Jesmonite won't stick to the silicone once it dries. So you can just easily clean this off. It's also a great way to make sure you get all your mixture out of your cups and into your mold. It's also great to make terrazzo, and I can also touch on that later on. And then the most important part is our Jesmonite base and liquid. This is for AC100. It is a two-part. You have the acrylic polymer liquid, and then you have the mineral base. Awesome, so now that you know what I have laid out in front of me, let's get started. So I'm gonna start by putting on my gloves. Okay. The first step of the process is to make sure you have the right measurements. Jesmonite AC100 is a 2.5 to 1 ratio. That means for every 2.5 parts powder you have, you're gonna have 1 part liquid. So if you have 250 grams of powder, you're gonna have 100 grams of liquid. Let me show you a good way to measure out how much Jesmonite you'll need for your project. So I like to start off by making sure there is nothing in my mold and that it's completely empty. And then I like to put it on my kitchen scale, make sure it's tared out and on grams. Then I like to just take plain water, just simple water, and I like to fill your mold all the way up until it's about to overflow. Let's make sure we have enough. Okay, perfect. So I have 177 grams of water right here in this mold. I'm gonna go over to the Jesmonite calculator and I'm going to input 180 grams of water just to make the math easier. And from there, Jesmonite calculator is going to spit out the exact measurements of AC100 base and liquid that you need. I also like to round those measurements up just to the nearest whole number, just to make measuring easy, and you don't necessarily have to be that scientific about it. Another reason I like to round up my measurements is to ensure I have enough product for my molds and that I don't have to make more Jesmonite in the middle of my project. Yep. After measuring my water in my mold, I like to make sure that it's completely dried out, just so it doesn't have any effect on the Jesmonite itself or the pigments in setting times, curing times, all those things. The water will affect it. So just make sure, just with a paper towel, kitchen towel, any towel you have, just make sure it's completely cleaned out and dry. Make sure it's completely cleaned out and dry and there's no watermarks or anything in there. Perfect. So now I'm going to be measuring out our base and liquid. After putting in 180 grams of water into the Jesmonite calculator, it gave us 225 grams of base and 90 grams of liquid. Just to be safe for spills or extra messes, I'm gonna round up to 250 grams of base and 100 grams of liquid. I'm gonna measure out my base first into one of our cups. Oh, perfect. Okay, and then that's slightly more, so you can just take some out. Perfect. And then in a separate cup, I'm going to be putting in our liquid. And why I mix them in separate cups is just for the mixing process to have less bumps and lumps. So like when you're baking, you add your dry ingredients to your liquids, right? So same kind of concept, you add it in sections. So we're gonna be adding half of this powder to this liquid first, and then the other half. So I'm gonna measure out 100 grams of liquid. Perfect. So before I mix my powder and my liquid, I'm going to go ahead and add my pigment into my liquid. So when using liquid pigments, I like to make sure I'm following the 2% rule. What the 2% rule is making sure that the volume of pigment does not exceed 2% of the total volume of your project. So I'm using 350 grams today in my total project. These both combined equal to 350 grams. So I don't want to use more than 7 grams of pigment. I'm not going to be using 7 grams of pigment today. If you want a darker color in a more pure form, I would definitely make sure you're measuring out 2% of your total volume so you don't exceed that. The reason we follow the 2% rule is because if you go over 2%, it has an effect on your project. It won't set properly, it will take, or not at all, or it will take super long time to set. It won't have the right consistency, essentially. I'm just going to add a couple drops of this blue color in. Let's add about, that's good. It's a good amount, 4 drops. Perfect. And so now I'm going to be taking my mixing blade and mixing the pigment into the liquid before adding the powder in, just to make sure that pigment's combined fully and so we're not getting any weird pigmentation streaks or anything. Perfect. And then I'm going to start adding in my powder in small portions, like I said earlier. So we're going to add about half first, and then I'm going to mix that in. Perfect. And so once that's fully combined, we're going to mix in another section. I guess we're doing thirds today. Adding in the rest. Perfect. What we're looking for consistency is like basically the same consistency as pancake batter. You don't want any lumps, you don't want those bubbles, don't really matter, but when I mix it, I don't want to see any dry pockets of powder, just so it's like super smooth, super silky and nice. Now I'm going to tell you how I like to use my 2-part bucket system that I was talking about earlier to clean my blade. So I'm going to be putting it into the non-soapy water first and just running that. You can see that most of it got off of there after that first pass, and then I'm going to go over to the soapy water. You can see that it's pretty much clean, and then so then I just like to take a towel and dry off the rest. And then you have a clean blade. So now I'm just going to take one of my silicone spatulas, and I'm going to get all that extra powder off the edges just so it doesn't affect the final product. So we're just going to make sure it's all mixed in and incorporated. Perfect. Put that off to the side real quick, and then we're going to start pouring. So I like to do a couple things when I'm pouring. First, I like to pour about 10 inches away just to eliminate any bubbles. This way the bubbles can pop on their way down. So I like to start off by pouring in about 1/4 of my mixture just to coat that first bottom layer. This is called a gel coat. And this is just a great way to make sure there's no bubbles in your final project. So I'm just tapping around the edges, just making sure that the whole bottom of my mold is coated. As you can see, like that. Then I like to tap those bubbles out just a little bit before filling in the bed rest. Perfect. So now I'm gonna keep pouring from a height in a slow, making sure I'm pouring slow and not too fast. Because if you pour a little bit too fast, then that allows for more air bubbles to form down in there. And then again, like we mixed, we're gonna pour in sections too. So I'm gonna stop pouring that and I'm gonna keep tapping, just again to make sure there's no bubbles. So now I'm going to finish pouring just from the top again. We're gonna pour from the middle. Here it comes. Making sure I have all of that product in my molds, just so I have enough. And it's filled all the way to the top. Once you get to this part where there's not too much coming out anymore, I like to then take my silicone spatula and then go around the edges and knock it all off the sides, because look how much more product is gonna come out. So if you think you didn't have enough, you probably did. You just didn't scrape all of it out, which is fine. We're gonna tap it and make sure it's even everywhere all around the mold, so there's no uneven edges and it's all nice and flat on the bottom. And if it get messy, that's fine. You can just wipe off the edge. You can see all those bubbles coming up to the surface. If you keep tapping, you'll find more bubbles. Perfect, okay, so we're gonna clean up these edges just a little bit, and this is why we wear gloves, so we're not afraid to get messy. Perfect. And then this is when I like to change out my gloves. One thing I like to do to eliminate the waste and keep it eco-friendly and sustainable is make terrazzo out of the product we don't use. So one super easy way to do that is just take your silicone spatula and your silicone cup and just run it around the edges, creating a super thin layer just along the edges. Because if it's too thick, the terrazzo won't work in the right way. So if you just create a super thin layer. This is also a great way to know when your project's done. So once this terrazzo has dried fully, then you can go ahead and take your mold out. So I like to call that the terrazzo timer. And it doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be pretty, it just has to cover and be thin enough. Perfect, so I'm gonna go dump this in my two-part system once again. Perfect, and then I'm just gonna let that sit in my soapy water. This is gonna take about 20 minutes to dry. I can go ahead and set a timer on my phone, or you can use your terrazzo timer, either one. So yeah, we'll see you in 20 minutes. Okay, so now that we're ready to demold, I just wanna touch on 3 ways that you know how your project's ready to demold. One is using that terrazzo timer that I was talking about earlier. If you can crunch it and it falls off just like that, then your project is also done curing. Another way is that as I'm feeling this, it's slightly warm. So Jesmonite has an exothermic reaction. That means as it's setting up, it releases heat, right? So a good way to tell is when it's just starting to cool off is when you want to, or fully cool is when you want to demold it. So right now it's just starting to cool off. It reached its peak in heat, so now it's on its way down. Another way is to just check on your phone. So I set a timer for about 25 minutes, and that's how long it's probably been. So yeah, we're gonna demold it. A great way I like to demold my projects is I like to run my hand along the edge, just loosening them up so it makes it super smooth and easy for it to come out. And then I just like to flip it over and just peel off like that. And as it's still setting, you can see that there's kind of weird pigmentation. As it's setting, all of that is going to just disappear and just all be the same color and super nice. And then from here, you can see that the edge is kind of sharp, so be careful when you're demolding trays because the edge can be pretty sharp. So one way to eliminate that is just to run a sanding sponge along the edges, just right here, just like this, just to make it smooth all over and even. I like to make sure that I'm not sanding the top part because that will create super big scratch marks and just other imperfections that we don't want. And you don't need to sand it just because it's so smooth already. There's no need for sanding it right now. So now your project is all complete. We have a cutie little cloud, super nice. We can set different things. I would use this for like jewelry, anything, keys. You can use it right away, right out of the mold. If you want an extra level of protection for your project, you can go ahead and wait 24 hours for sealing. We'll have a different video later on going over all our different sealers and all the tips and tricks for sealing. So that's a wrap on the basics of Jesmonite AC100. If you have any questions, make sure you drop them in the comments below. And also make sure to like and subscribe for more Jesmonite content. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.